And I taught them the song called The Rakish Kind, which later they recorded The Roving Kind. And on top of Old Smoky, which I don't think, which I did the lead on. And I got the tape and I sent it to Decca, but Decca wasn't interesting. Then later they were sold to Decca on a deal at Gordon, the orchestra leader put them on. And that's when they began. But up to that point, they didn't have a record. When they first got their first big record, which on top of Old Smoky, and then it was Good Night Irene, and then So Long It's Been Good to Know You, and then that whole list of records they did, that hit the top 10 grade. And I, for instance, got a phone call from their publisher, who was also Woody Guthrie's publisher, who was also Josh White's publisher, and Leadbelly's publisher, Howard Richmond of TRO. You know him?
No, definitely not.
Published everybody in that period. Still does. Howard Richmond, well, the only great independent publisher. His son Larry runs the company now. But if you want stories of that period, and the whole period, Al Brackman was their general manager. Al is still alive. He was ill a little bit, but he lives in Planville, between me and Gene Ritchie. So I do the job. That's where I visit. And a young fellow named Pete Cameron.
That is
That's the other name. Well, Pete was only one of the group. Leventhal and Cameron worked together. Brackman was the general manager. Howie Richmond ran the organization. And he was the one who signed everybody up and gave us each, for the first time, a little tape recorder. Revered, one of the first little tape recorders we used. And he told Woody, record everything you know. Oscar, record everything you know. Leadbelly, record everything you know. I don't think Leadbelly did, but Woody did. And later they found the tapes in a closet. I said, there's got to be tapes. I know he's been making them. And they found them in a closet, these little tapes. 1,000 songs of Woody's. I kept giving them tapes, and finally I did a song called Guys at...
They found This Land Is Your Land on a tape.
Oh, that he already had.
Okay.
That was he had. See, but Woody was the only one who actually printed his songs. He wrote them out and typed them and put copyright on them. The rest of us didn't. I did 25 albums before I copyrighted a song. A lot of them I wrote, including a number of the Bawdy songs, of which I only had a line here or a line there, or a verse or maybe something like that. I wrote music for most of them, where I couldn't find original. And these songs became popular that the Weavers had. And so they started looking for more, and they called me up, and I gave them some of the songs, and I taped them, and one of them, A Guy is a Guy, which originally was A Gob is a Slob, different words, different notes. The music was quite different. It's a very old song. Mitch Miller took and recorded and made me a big shot. Even before that, Pete had learned a song that I wrote called When I First Came to This Land, which I wrote in '48, based upon a melody that was Oleana, the melody of Oleana, and words which were in either Yiddish or German, I don't know which, but I can't tell which. It's wenn ich zu der Land habe gekommen, ich bin nicht reich am Mann, habe gekauft der kleine Katschke, besorgt die Katschke, like that. So I changed the melody. I made it an older melody, and also wrote words to it in English. And Pete heard it and liked it, so Pete recorded it. And then after he recorded it, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir recorded it, and all the school books, and all of a sudden I was a big writer. Similarly with the Burgundian Carol. He came on that Christmas he came on my program. He was one of my first guests. And I sang the Burgundian Carol. Pete recorded it, and it was one of the Weavers' big Christmas songs. And then A Guy is a Guy, Doris Day recorded. So all of a sudden I was in the business. Now what happened with me is the same as happened with the music, you see. I was a folk singer, singing ballad just for fun for my family, and all of a sudden the records took off, and all of a sudden it was obviously a big, it could be an industry. There was thousands of dollars to be made, $50,000, $60,000 for a hit. I mean, that was that's like $500,000 right now. And as that went on, time went on, it really became industrial. People were calling me and saying, you have another song like A Guy is a Guy.
And what vintage, early 50s? Is that?
There's the 50s, 50, 51, 52. Okay. And that's the other thing I should mention. When Burl knew that he'd lose his acting career, his Hollywood career, if he was still blacklisted. And Josh knew that he would not go around the country and lose his Hollywood career because he was then working in Hollywood. When Robbins knew that it would be a problem, said they'd tell everybody he was a homosexual. When the same with Leonard Bernstein, they would tell everybody. When they knew that their careers were at stake, their livings were at stake, the pressure on them was tremendous. Not only from the family, also the feeling you had that people looked at you as if you were some kind of a spy or traitor. It was a terrible time. The miasma was impossible to swim. I didn't have that. I didn't have a family, except my father and mother. My father was very badly hurt. Very badly hurt. In fact, my sister said to me, "You've got to call a press conference and tell the press." I said, "Tell them what?" And if I called, who'd come? Forget it. But I had money coming in. See, so I went back to Canada. I was kicked off every television show. I was making $4,000 in 1 week. That was $20,000 now. 4,000, and the next week I was making nothing. So I went back to Canada, stayed with relatives. Then came back to the States, so it was even worse than it had been before. I went to Europe. I took about 5 trips to Europe. The FBI was wild. The last time they wouldn't give me my passport. They wouldn't refuse me my passport, but that came through. Eventually, the industry took over. There was money in these songs. And the groups began to set up. Now, the Weavers was one. Right after that, Harry Belafonte recorded all the Calypso songs. Those were the Irving Burgee. Had appeared on my show as Lord Burgess. He got songs from Louise Bennett. He was rewriting them. I brought him to Harry. Harry recorded a whole album of Calypso songs, and he was a star and making a lot of money. Then not the Brothers Four. First was the Kingston Trio. Took it off of Harry because he had done so well with his West Indian songs. They call themselves the Kingston Trio from Kingston. Right. And they did a couple of his songs, like the John B. Sayles and a few others, a couple of Gene Ritchie songs, 5 songs, a couple of Woody songs. They were a tremendous thing, see? And so groups began to set up.
What did you think about people like the Kingston Trio making all that money off of these songs?
It didn't bother me. Frankly, it didn't bother me. It bothered a number of people.
It was money at a level that had not been made previously.
No, it was money on a tremendous scale. It was the American way industry getting tremendous. $1 billion industry was kind of.
But did you feel? We're just, as we said, just reading.
I didn't lose by it. So.
Yeah, or were they authentic versus these like?
Oh no, the authenticity is a question. If you've read the first chapter of the Ballad on which I spent over a year and a half writing, because that just making when I kept thinking, gee, the Woody wasn't traditional, you see, and I wasn't traditional. I was rewriting and changing and fixing. I began to the image I had in my mind, I realized was the wrong image, and I began to re-examine it. So I didn't object at all, never did. I did. In fact, when Bob Dylan on the program at Newport, see, I was on the board of Newport. I chose this program. When Bob said he was going to work with Paul Butterfield, I thought that was fine because I'd always myself worked with some of these. I didn't know he was going to do electric, but Alan did. And when Alan saw the electric, the rehearsal of the electric, he started a fight with Dylan. They came to blows. But Dylan went out and he did what he thought was right, what Al Grossman thought was right. And he was depressed after that. After we had a party at one of the mansions we always did. And he sat on the steps. He was wearing this high, funny hat, like Micawber or something. He was sitting there, he was very down. I said to Bob, I said, you were terrific. I said, I think what you did was great. I didn't tell him I thought he'd done it wrong, but what he did was great. You see, an audience comes with expectations. If they're looking for traditional music, and somebody opens the show with a pop song, they're not going to like it. I was at Town Hall, Carnegie Hall, we did a whole concert. I ran a series, and I had Gene Shepard on because he was a big disc jockey. And Gene opened with some of his reminiscences. The audience booed him off the stage. They weren't interested in his recollections. They wanted traditional music, see? Or what they thought was traditional music. So expectation is important. If Bob had gotten out on the stage and done the songs that they recognized him for, the Woody Guthrie things, and his shoes of Spanish leather, and the Leaving of Liverpool, which he called Not the Leaving, it's me, and all the Gene Ritchie songs that he'd learned, and Masters of War, and done those, that audience would have cheered. And then at the end, he would have come back and said, you know, I'm learning new songs, and they have a new sound to them. I'd like you to listen to them and hear them. I like them as much as the old ones. I'm not going to give up the old ones, of course, but I'd like you to hear some of these. And then done them. That audience would have gone crazy. But he didn't do that. It was a mistake. That was the only mistake he made.
So the audience, that's what we were, the audience actually booed him.
Oh, they booed him.
So
I have
They
heard
booed
things from a little knot of 200 people booed to 10,000.
The general audience was taken aback and upset.
Mm-hmm.
As he went on, it was so uncomfortable that after about 25 to a half an hour, that was it, of playing the songs, he himself got uncomfortable and started doing an acoustic set of his old songs. And then they accepted him, everybody cheered, and that was fine. But that whole first section was really...
They say Seeger was tremendously upset. There's
Oh,
a
Pete
story
was on.
about he's going to cut the cables.
He was going to cut the cables, Alan was going to kill him, there was a lot of crap. I mean, Alan rewrote more songs than anybody could imagine. And Pete was a sophisticated player. Pete was I mean, some of the arrangements of the Weavers sounded like the Andrews sisters. Let's not kid ourselves.
What are the impressions of the artists generally? Seeger was crazy. He didn't like it. Alan didn't like it. How about some of the other performers?
Most of them didn't like it.
Really?
Most of them did not like it because it was not just arranged or popularized folk music. Don't forget, we were just coming out of the big band deal.
Right.
It was basically heavy metal.
Yeah, it was rock and roll.
It was rock and roll. And even though, see, to me, rock and roll, I've been playing, see, I was in a peculiar position. I've been playing rock and roll on my show for years. Only it was rhythm and blues. It was race records.
Right.
When I played Josh or Brownie, to me it was the same as playing Memphis Minnie and Tampa Red and Chuck Berry. They, to me, were the essence of a folk music of which I was not brought up in, but was still part of our American culture and part of what my program had its franchise for. So I put it on. So I wasn't as wrecked as they were. I've tried myself to do rock and roll. So did Bill Oakes, of course, he tried. Terrible unsuccess, but the point is, Phil made an attempt. It was unsuccessful and stopped. All rock groups are unsuccessful at first. Until they start working their way in and getting together and making a piece out of it. And nowhere. God, how many rock groups I've heard that were nothing to begin with, like the Beatles, the Kings, and the Brains. They were nothing. I mean, they were trying to be something different. That's it. So, let's see. She just reminded me. Let me just make a call.
You know, about the Hootenanny controversy. After your book ends.
Which Hootenanny controversy?
The TV show.
Oh, the show. Well,
because
because of this big industrial setup, it was decided by, it was ABC, to set up a show called Hootenanny. Now, the word Hootenanny was not copyrighted, not trademarked, even though People's Songs and magazine Sing Out thought it was. Can't copyright a title. That's against American copyright law. They couldn't even trademark it. So they set up the show called Hootenanny. And they invited the popular song people. The people, see, we were known in the centers. We were known in New York. We were known in Boston. We were known in Chicago. Known in San Francisco, in California, in Houston, in the Middle America, in Kansas City, in Cleveland. There were coffee houses all there. But the whole of America didn't know Shirley Abacare, who was on the program with me from Australia. They didn't know the Tarriers. They didn't know something. So the important people were the Kingston Trio and the Harry Belafonte. And those were the ones they wanted on. And they definitely didn't want, because this was big-time television, where they had what they called a copy editor or a continuity acceptance man. It was usually a lawyer. Continuity acceptance, that is, he was supposed to accept the scripts. Well, if he saw a name on the script that was in red channels or counterattack or in a special list that he had, he wouldn't have him on. You know how many times, I can't tell you how many times I would be told, listen, Mr. Brand, are you free next week? We'd like to do a show, a TV show on American so-and-so. Great, I'll be down. 3 days later, we've changed the format of the show, which meant they had to do continuity accepting. That still happens today.
Yeah.
There are programs I'm not welcome on, and every once in a while, if I do the wrong song, I won't be welcome anymore. So the Hootenanny show went on, and their intention was not to engage in controversy, but merely to take advantage, actually to take advantage of the industry, of the billion-dollar industry that had been set up. Now, the people who had started the industry in a way, the Weavers, were not welcome, because they already had a problem, and I was involved with that problem too, tremendously, as I was involved in the John Henry Falk case. My testimony, in part, was what killed our friend Mr. Hartnett. So that means, so I was involved in all these. I have some insight, of course. The Hootenanny show wouldn't have Pete on, naturally. They wouldn't have the Weavers on at all, because they were blacklisted. They weren't going to fight against their sponsors. And you see, it all comes down to the American way. You have to remember that. It's the American way. The general American public doesn't like Communist Party propaganda. It doesn't like progressive propaganda. They're not going to elect George McGovern. They're not going to elect McCarthy, the Senator McCarthy. They're not going to elect these guys. But they're not going to stand up and say, you guys get out of the country. They're not going to say, go back to where you came from, or if you didn't come from there, go there anyway. The American people are funny people. They're willing to accept a lot of things without anger. But if one person, or 3 or 4, write postcards or letters to an advertiser and say, you have so-and-so on your show you're sponsoring, we are not going to buy your product, it begins to hurt. And if you got a guy like this guy Johnson, Robert Johnson, up in Buffalo, who owns a supermarket and claims he owns a string of them, and says, if you put so-and-so in your program, I will not have your things on my shelf. The sponsor gets scared. And the sponsor is the boss. No matter what they say, the sponsor is the boss. There are only 2 people I know who refused to accept that pressure. One was David, what the hell was his name, the producer who was an actor, a small guy who had a program on PBS for a long, long time. David Susskind. Yeah. Susskind stood up against him on a couple of occasions. Susskind was one. The other one was Seymour and Siegel of WNYC. There was a third. His name was Craig Fisher of NBC, running children's programs and the Today Show, among others. Craig is an amazing man. When I was music director of Exploring, which was his show, it was a major 1.5-hour children's show, network show on NBC, one of the first. He got a note. He says, Oscar, listen to this note. We'd like to speak to you about Oscar Brand. We've received a couple of notices. He is in red channels and is a Communist Party supporter. Craig says, Oscar, come with me. Nobody would have done that. Nobody did that. It was always were fearful of suits by the artists and by the unions. You would just be told, look, we're not doing this kind of work anymore. We're not doing the show anymore. We're getting somebody to take your place. 100 times I heard that. Instead, he says, come here, Oscar, we're going someplace. We went up to the 8th floor, and there was a guy sitting behind the desk, continuity acceptance, a lawyer, with the books on the side. And Craig said, I got this note from you. This is Oscar Brand. Would you tell him what your problem is? Well, I never saw anybody squirm in such a small space. He says, well, we have these communications. I said, I'm just curious, of course. What are the communications? Well, it's this postcard. They got a postcard saying that you're in red channels and that you're in support of the Communist Party. I said, well, your informant is absolutely correct. I am in red channels. I said, of course, I was also blacklisted by the Communist Party because on either occasion I wasn't going to do what red channels wanted and I wasn't going to do what the Communist Party wanted. I said, I wanted to do what I wanted. I said, I'm certainly not a supporter of the Communist Party of America. I never would. And Craig Fisher said, Oscar, don't say another word. He said, he doesn't have to say that. I know Oscar Brand. I don't want to hear from you again on the subject. And we went out. He did it with a couple of other people. I wanted Richard Dyer Bennett on that program. I got Theo on, I got Burl on. I wanted Dyer Bennett on the program. Dyer Bennett was really badly blacklisted. He was dropped by Hurek and everything because of Burleigh's estate and so I made an arrangement. They said, all right. Craig Fisher said, okay, you want him on? Put him on. He said, if it's necessary, I'll go up to that idiot on the top floor again.
Did he get on?
No, he didn't want to go on. I called him up. He said, what am I going to get for it? I said, $750. He didn't know all the fuss that had to be done. I said, $750. He said, I never worked for less than $1,000. I said, for God's sake, Richard, I can't get you anymore. This is outside our budget. It's outside our budget. We're putting it up, and we're going to take it off. We're going to find another place. He said, Oscar, I won't work for that. I said, okay. And that was it. I came back to Craig. I said, he wants 1,000. Craig said, fuck him. Not because he was a communist, but because he wanted more money than Craig had. And that was the thing. But only Craig that I know, David Susskind, with a couple of actors, and Seymour N. Siegel of WNYC, who despite all the pressures on a publicly owned station, politically owned station, refused to be moved by the blacklist. The rest of the country was fine. The rest of the country was all right. See, I arranged for the Weavers to be on the Today Show. I used to do it regularly. Jack Parr was doing it. And I did it was Christmas. Yeah, I did a Christmas program. Sammy Levinson was the MC taking Jack Parr's place. Sammy says to me, geez, we want to do a big New Year's show. Who do you think we should have? I said, why don't you use the Weavers? They're really doing terrifically. They're coming up. They really got a number of copies. He says, that's right. That's a good idea, Sammy Levinson. So they called on the Weavers. The Weavers were supposed to come up. And they refused to take a loyalty oath, which was then required by the networks. And they called a news conference. And made a big thing of it. They never went on. But, now this is, I had a whole bunch of television shows in Canada. I was still half Canadian. I had to do a six. I went up there and did a show. And I watched that night. I read the newspapers about the whole thing. I felt terrible because I felt it was my fault. And Sammy felt awful. Sammy felt awful. He was really very down. Jack Parr had come back on the show. And, I mean, he had to refer to it. It was in all the papers. It was big news. He said to the audience out there, good old middle America sitting out there watching the Tonight Show. And he says, you know, folks, I'm really concerned about what happened here with this whole blacklist, the Weavers, the loyalty oath. He says, do you think that we should have refused people their right to be on the program because of their political leanings? And that audience, as one man and woman, yes, yeah, Ray, and applauded. See? The blacklist was supported.
Ira Daly, please tell operator. Ira Daly, please tell operator.
You can believe all you want, but it was supported by the American populace. Not actively, because as I say, America does not actively blacklist. Not middle America. They don't. I mean, we have a Grange background. We have a populist background in America. We have a revolutionary background in America in a way. But if it's American, it's one thing. That's why Browder tried to say the Communist Party is American democracy. Communism is 20th century democracy, that was Browder said. In order to make the party acceptable, at a time when it was possible that they might have even got elected. Americans are not blacklisters, but they will not attack somebody who is. And there are enough fanatics and idiots, as far as I'm concerned, idiots, who would follow a Joe McCarthy. There are enough. Enough to make a splash and hit the newspapers. Not enough to really make a difference. They are not really enough. They will not. As far as I can see, the American populace is a funny bunch. And while they will not run a revolution, they don't mind people singing revolutionary songs. There are times when it comes up, the barometer comes up, and they get very angry and fearful. Like when we were worried because we learned that Russia was getting the atomic bomb through spies, through Klaus Fuchs and others. See, Mrs. Rosenberg was in my guitar class. I taught her guitar. She was a lovely little lady. There was no reason to put those people to death. I mean, nobody's been put to death in the United States for political reasons. It was a fear in America that they were afraid, and also a Jewish judge who wanted to show that it was important. He was not going to be swayed by the fact that he had two Jews in front of him. It was a terrible thing, very, very bad. I knew the Mirapole boys very well. And it was a very sad thing. But America in general is not that kind of a country. It's not a blacklisting, not a red baiting country. But they will follow many people will follow some stupid demagogue who makes a loud noise. And that's the size of it. Anyway, that's blacklist. And of course, the 40s were the result of the civil rights movement in part two. When would I have in Canada, for instance, or even this country, have gotten a chance to sing, to walk with Woody Guthrie and a communist, and Pete Seeger, who were Communist Party members? I didn't know it then, I read the book. With Leadbelly, with Brownie and Sonny, with all the other black musicians. I wouldn't have had a chance to work with them, and I wouldn't have heard their music, and it wouldn't have affected my kind of presentation. I sing with a syncopated beat now. It was not my way of performing. That's what I say in my concerts today when I perform. I tell them when I learned a song I learned in Canada, and show them how it's done here in the country, and show them how the music coalesced into popular music and rock music today. That's where it came from in part. And that's why we have what we call rock and roll today. And that's why the folk music movement, which used to be industrial, is now as part of, still industrial, but it has a different name and a different performance, that's all.
What about, no, go ahead.
Oh, well, I know I was going to go. I'm
Yeah,
going
I
to
have
ask
to go
about pictures and, do you know,
I have a lot of
sources
pictures.
Photos and,
Yeah, I have a lot of lying around places. A lot of them are in the archives of the University of Manitoba. I have a lot of stuff. A lot of things. When you get moving, let me know.